No, we want fresh blood. I really mean it. I want fresh blood, which you can do whatever you want unless there's a law that prevents you from doing it. What the country needs is someone who will stand firm on the salient issues of the day so that we can deliver the country to safety. And so when we repeal laws, we're not going to have a legislative vacuum, which some people say, Ben, you can't do it because you'll create a legislative vacuum. I say bollocks. And he therefore, again, is trying to make those infected fish that came out of this putrid pool. He's trying to make them all swim in the right direction. It won't work. There's no splitting the vote with reform. Reform offers no hope for this country. So reform still is Farage. Farage is reform. Though Yusuf has some, Zia Yusuf, who's his new guy he's brought in, does have some kind of peculiar hold on Farage. But 2 days before that, he was saying, I'm going to get rid of it. Then 2 days later, he's got the architect of it joining the party. How is he going to govern? It'll be a complete shit show. Please take one thing at face value. Nigel Farage does not have a political philosophy. He pivots one way or the other, depending on what he thinks he needs to say in order to curry favor with whichever constituency he's speaking to. The best form of child rearing has to be through the family. You wouldn't need the Online Safety Act if parents were monitoring their children more closely. I call it Bonk for Britain because I want lots of Brits to be getting together and shagging, and what could be more beneficial and more fun for the country than doing that?
Right, Ben Habib, welcome to the Risky Scientists.
Thank you very much for having me on with the Risky Scientists.
Well, thank you, Ben. So I'm just going to clarify something I clarified in a preview video, which is that you and I are on first name terms. We have spoken before. I am not being overly familiar when I call you Ben.
No, not at all. Please do call me Ben. Mr. Newsom, call me Ben.
Well, no, this is the Ben and Bruce podcast
Yeah.
right now. I could just imagine somebody starting to type already that Newsom fellow is far too familiar with Mr. Habib. Right. So just clarify that. Okay, so let's get into some politics, Ben. So we are speaking less than 2 weeks since Advance UK held its official launch, and you have spoken many times that your intent is to register the party with the Electoral Commission. So what is the status of the party right now?
So we hit the self-imposed hurdle of 30,000 members before, that was the hurdle we set before we would apply to the Electoral Commission. I wanted to test that the party actually had traction with the electorate, not just in my mind, but we hit the 30,000 members pretty damn quickly. By the 5th or 6th of September, we'd hit 30,000 members. It was the 6th of September we hit 30,000 members. We announced it on the 7th. And on the 9th of September, we applied to the Electoral Commission because everything was ready to go. Our application, statement of finance, governance procedures, etc., which formed the package, went to the Electoral Commission on the 9th of September. We've had some interaction with the Electoral Commission, and they asked us to make certain amendments to the Constitution, most of which we made, some of which we pushed back on, and I'm now waiting for further interaction with them. In fact, I texted them, emailed them yesterday asking them if they've got any update for me.
So that reminds me to ask you, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that when the Brexit Party transitioned to reform, or maybe it was when UKIP transitioned, Nigel Farage made some complaints about how the Electoral Commission was making it difficult. Have you experienced anything like that?
Too early to tell. So far, nothing which has made my eyebrows, raise my eyebrows or anything. I do believe our application was in very good order because we'd had, months on which to work, to work on it, and we put it together with, proper sort of legal advice, etc. The Constitution, I think, is solid and good and remarkable in the sense that it is robust and provides what the party needs in a way that I don't think any other party has in all of British politics. These people wish to run the country, but if you look at their own setup, the way they run their own parties, it's all pretty damn amateur. But I think what we've got is a really good constitution, thought through with obviously the benefit of experience and hindsight. And I hope that the Electoral Commission will see that.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to ask you about this, but so briefly, what differentiates your constitution from other party constitutions, do you think?
So I think the principal difference between ourselves and other parties, then there are many differences, but I think the principal difference is that we have created a body of non-executive members of the party, which are who are charged with, amongst other things, holding the party executive and leadership to account. So from the members, we're going to have a body of people who we call members of the college. And they are going to be the guiding light of the political philosophy of the party, its mission statement, which is part of our constitution. And if the leadership, that's me and the executive, start deviating, they will haul us back into line and sack me if necessary. And there's no such body of independent thinkers and guardians of political philosophy in any other party, which surprises me. You know, I come to politics, I suppose, from having had a career in running a public company. And in a public company, it's absolutely normal to have non-executive directors on the board to hold the executive to account. And it's through the non-executives that the shareholders get to hold their, their chief executive, et cetera, to account. And so I've adopted that kind of mechanism. But the college goes beyond just being a check and balance on the leadership. It also is designed to be almost like our parliamentary representatives. The members uh, can remove members of the college, and therefore they're effectively appointed by the membership. And they are the parliamentarians representing the electorate, being the members in our party. And being the parliamentarians, they hold us, the executives, the government, to account. And being the parliamentarians, the college, members of our college, as I call them, also are going to be instrumental in producing policy, identifying candidates, vetting candidates, making sure that we're fit for government in 2029 when we win the next general election.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so let's just close out the status of the party just by can you give a forecast of when you think the party will be officially registered, completed, approved by the Electoral Commission?
I don't know is the honest answer, the frank answer, but I don't mind if it takes a while, Bruce, because we're getting on with setting the party, getting the party moving. We've now got 37,000 members across the UK. The mainstream media is against us. So one of the main tasks we've got as a party is to use the membership we've now got to get into the psyche of the British electorate. So we've already started campaigning on the ground. Other parties aren't doing it. They're probably going to wait until the general election. We are already treating it as if we are in general election mode, and we are putting out leaflets, putting out Corex boards to put up in people's gardens, boards to put up in their windows, car stickers, and getting people to advocate for the party, proselytize for the party, and recruit new members to it. So that my aim is to get to 1 million members by 2029. Now, we may or may not get there, but if we get a good chunk of 1 million members by 2029, we will win the next general election. And we're not going to do it, as I say, through mainstream media because they've shut us down. So I'm going straight to the people of the country, to hell with everyone else, straight to the people of the country, and we're on it. And so I don't mind if it takes a while for the Electoral Commission to come through. It's not going to hold us back.
So what about the local elections, May of next year?
We're not targeting local elections. Our eyes are completely on the general election. It's going to be a significant challenge to get ready for a general election, which requires 650 odd MPs to be, candidates to stand as MPs, and to have the policy framework and to have the draft legislation backing up that policy, those policies, so that when we win the next general election, we go into Parliament absolutely ready, and on day one, we can enact our legislative program at day one. And so we're doing all of that. And the local elections, we'll fight local elections if we're up and ready, if we've got good candidates that wish to stand, if we've recruited councillors from other places who joined us. We've already got councillors, by the way, who've joined Advance, most of them having left Reform in disgust and joined us. And if they come up for re-election, obviously we'll fight those elections. But our focus is on the general election and the governing of this country, not on the local elections.
Yeah. So I accept all those arguments, but let me press you on some other arguments that
Yeah.
maybe you should um, campaign in at least some local councils uh, and maybe some by-elections, right? So the local councils, maybe there are some tottering conservative councils that are not currently run by Reform, or Reform is not likely to take those for whatever reason, given the elections of last year. I'm just thinking maybe you don't want to uh, challenge Reform directly and then get accused of splitting the vote, which we'll get
No,
into.
no, I don't. There's no splitting the vote with reform. Reform offers no hope for this country. So we will stand against. We won't be fearful of standing against reform. We are an independent political force, and we will stand against everyone.
Yeah. So okay, so let's include Reform Council. So maybe there's a council, maybe in Kent right now, where Reform is coming under criticism for not fulfilling its manifesto pledge. Right. In Kent's case, it's Reform said it was going to balance the books, and it's
It's
now having
not.
to raise taxes. Right. So maybe, there are councils like Kent that Advance UK could challenge, and maybe your good self could lead that challenge, offer themselves as a councilman. And then the second argument is that, if Advance UK is going to be ready for the general election 2029, going to be ready for government, particularly, it needs as many people with executive experience at the local level, regional level as possible. And local elections are one way to give them that.
I'm not convinced that the regional experience helps you in national government. Actually, I don't think being a councillor is a prerequisite to being an MP or a minister. Um, Indeed, I think that one of the failings of the political system is that too many people have joined parties, become councillors, become MPs, gone onto the front bench, and actually have very little real life experience. And what I hope that we will have by the time we get to 2029 is people who come from all walks of life with all forms of experience, administrative as well as in all the disciplines required to govern a country. And so we can bring people together, not just to create the policy framework and our legislative program, but then have the people who understand how to manage the civil service and the process to drive it through. And that's going to take a lot of fortitude. So, but I'm not. By the way, I'm not saying, Bruce, we won't stand in local elections. We're just not making that a target. If they come along and it makes sense, and the tea leaves all look good, and it looks like we could win, then we'll have a go, including
Yeah.
by-elections. I mean, by-elections would be an interesting and important test.
Yeah. So would you yourself stand in a by-election?
Yeah, I wouldn't say no. Absolutely. And the risk with standing in a by-election is that you lose, and everyone goes, "You're a loser." But if Rome wasn't built in a day, and we've got to get on the map. And I'm never going to be the child who won't jump off the high diving board for fear of making a mess of it. We have to be prepared to jump off the high diving board and see what happens, even if it is a god awful dive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'm just reflecting back to your comment that there are too many MPs who have gone the council local government route as the Americans say, route as the
Yeah,
British say, and it made me think there are too many MPs who have gone the undergraduate degree in PPE from Oxford route, and they've got parachuted in, they've met somebody, and they've
absolutely.
got
It's
they've
awful.
got a personal tie. Yeah,
The
and
party
maybe that
political
should be.
system, the party political
Yeah.
system in the UK has been dumbed down over decades of party leaders not having an independent body of people holding the leader to account. The leader has sought to recruit people who will just say yes, 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 yes to whatever they. So ultimately, you end up with a dumbed down set of parliamentarians because the
Yeah.
leader wants control, the executive wants control, and it's happened with the Conservative Party. The reason the Conservative Party is not conservative and seems entirely incompetent is because it's been hollowed out over decades of choosing people that will do its bidding, as opposed to people who will challenge the status quo and do what's right for the country. And Advance UK is going to be the antithesis of the way the Conservative Party is run, or indeed Reform, which is Farage. Farage is Reform, Reform is Farage. We're not going to be like that.
Yeah. Well, I think Rory Stewart is the epitome of the parachuted in conservative. Fortunately, his bubble has burst, but he went all the way up to run for leadership of the Conservative
Yeah.
Party based on
Or
what?
David
He's a
Cameron. Or David
yeah,
Cameron, Bruce. I mean, he did
yeah,
PPE at Oxford. He looks and
yeah,
feels like a really nice guy, but he's got zero experience in life. And he was the one the country needed to put right all the damage done by 13 years or whatever it was of Labour government. We needed David Cameron to be a true conservative. And actually, he was the heir to Blair. And all he did was make it even worse in this country. He took all Labour's policies and then gold plated them and propagated them further. And we needed
yeah,
him to reverse it. And the
yeah,
Conservative Party, I'm afraid, has been down that rabbit hole ever since.
yeah. Well, I've called the Cameron years the Blair Tribute Act. Yeah, and I've called it a progressive. It was a progressive government. It wasn't a
It
conservative
was
government. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
All right. So, Ben, let me ask you the next question on Advance UK. So, what is your relationship with Advance UK? I think you're the leader. Are you
Yeah.
the owner? I think you're a funder. Are you a chairman, a party chairman, a party leader? What are
No.
you?
So the membership owns the party. The articles of association, which has nothing to do with the Electoral Commission, and the company limited by guarantee, which is the appropriate form of company. It's a non-profit entity, and every time a member joins, they become a part owner of the party. Basically, it's a membership, and so there are 37,000 members. I am the leader. The members can remove me as leader by a simple vote at any time. They can call a plebiscite of the membership and get rid of me by a margin of one, if necessary. The college that we're putting together will also be able to get rid of me with a simple majority at any time if they wish to. There will be a board. Once we get the constitution through the Electoral Commission, the company will have a board of directors, and it'll number up to 11 directors, eight of which will be from the college, in other words, non-executives and independent, and three of which will be from the leadership, which will be myself, the national nominating officer, and the treasurer, the finance guy. And through the board, we will be held to account on a day-to-day basis. Um, so that's basically how the party would operate. I don't own any of it. I have donated, £100,000 to the party, and a total amount raised by the party so far in its 3 months is £600,000, including my 100 grand.
Yeah. So the college is very interesting. And what you just said about the college being able to remove you by a majority vote, would that I've not thought about this before, but would the college's vote have to be ratified by the general membership, or are both
No,
either of those? Yeah.
either of those. So the way it works with the members can remove any member of the board at any time with a simple majority, and I will be on the board. So if they remove me from the board, my leadership position wouldn't automatically fall, but to all intents and purposes, my leadership position would go, and the college would need to find a new leader. Um, but the college can actually remove me as leader of the party at any time.
Yeah. Okay. So since we're on the college, I think the college is very interesting. It's sort of like, you tell me if I'm wrong to characterize it this way, but it's like a policy think tank, manifesto think tank. Is that right way to think
Yeah,
about it?
it's a bunch of non. If you put it in a public company context, they're non-executive directors of the company who just have the shareholders' interests in mind and want to make sure that the company stays on the straight and narrow, that its leadership performs. And just like the non-execs can remove people from a board of directors, they can remove me as leader. That's one analogy. The other analogy that I use is they're the representatives of the electorate being the membership. They're like parliamentarians in our party, and I'm like the government, and they can, as parliament, get rid of the government.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So you've spoken often about Elon Musk. So what is Elon Musk's relationship with the party?
So there's no formal relationship between Elon Musk and the party. He has seen that reform doesn't pass muster, and he has endorsed Advance UK. And we'll just see how that relationship develops. I hope he will continue to endorse Advance UK.
Yeah,
I hope
got it.
everyone comes round
Yeah,
and endorses Advance UK.
yeah, yeah. So you are a donor to the party. Who
Yeah.
are the other donors?
So the bulk of the money has come from the membership. For every member, on average, the membership had been set at £10 per head per annum, but every member on average was contributing about £15. They were joining as a member, and most people on average were donating another £5. There are no other significant donors comparable to me. Um, my brother has donated a very significant sum to the party, but it's much less than mine. Um, that's a very loyal brother. And then I think the next biggest donation is like a couple of £1,000.
Yeah. So are you, this is kind of in corporate terms, this is quite an invasive question. Are you in discussion with donors who have already donated to other parties?
So am I in discussion with donors that I'm trying to nick off the Conservatives or Reform? Not to the best of
Yes.
my knowledge, I'm not. I have met many people. It's interesting. I've been tapped on the shoulder by many people in the city who have said to me that many of whom have left the country, left the United Kingdom, living in Italy, Dubai, Portugal. Those are the three principal places they've gone, asking if they can help in some way. They know that the country needs a change of direction, a dramatic change in direction, which is why they've left. And they want to be able to come back. They recognize the Conservative Party is broken. They don't have any faith in Farage, and they want to see if they can help with what I'm doing. And we'll just see how those discussions unfold. So far, I haven't got any big money. There are three kinds of donors, Bruce. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but there are three kinds of donors. There's the donor who wants to go to the cocktail party and have champagne and hobnob with people they think are the great and good of the country. Well, we're not going to attract those kinds of donors yet because we're a rough, ready, roll your sleeves up, get working really hard, no champagne kind of party. So we're not going to get them. And then there are the donors who want to influence politics, who want to be at the top table so they can put pressure on you to do the policies that they want. Well, we haven't started polling in the polls yet. There's no obvious likelihood yet, though I think there will be, of us forming a government. So we're not going to attract those kinds of donors. And then the third category of donor is the donor who's triggered, who cares about the country and just wants to back the right horse, a horse that will deliver. And those are the kind of donors we're talking to at the moment. And they're unlikely, just going back to your question, they're unlikely to come from Reform or the Conservative Party. Because if they are triggered, if they recognize the threats the country's facing, they would already have left Reform and the Conservative Party.
Yeah, I got it.
Does
Are
that
you
make
open
sense?
to, yes, sir. Are you open to foreign donors?
You're not allowed to take foreign money into a political party in Great Britain. Bizarrely, there is a separate process to be registered as a political party in Northern Ireland, and they can take foreign money. And we will be represented in Northern Ireland in due course, and we will then be able to take foreign money into Northern Ireland.
Yeah,
Bizarre. It's been set up like that so the Republic of Ireland can put money into Northern Irish politics
yeah, and Americans,
and
which
Americans.
segues,
Yeah,
yeah, which overrepresented in Northern Irish donations,
yeah.
which segues to my next question. Now, Americans are paying a lot of attention to reform on the conservative right. Uh, do you have any American attention other than Elon Musk in Advance UK?
I don't know whether we've got attention beyond Elon Musk, but I suspect if we've got Elon Musk's attention, we must at least be on the radar of other Americans. He's got 225 million followers on X. That's nearly half. I think there are 536 million people on X. So he's got nearly half. the number of people on X. So every time he tweets, I mean, it's very, very helpful if he reposts stuff that we put out or puts a comment on. So if he's listening, please, Elon, get right behind us. We don't need your money. Well, of course, we won't say no if you're offering it to us, but get behind us and endorse us and keep that going. It's very, very helpful for us.
Yeah. And Elon, if you're listening, please come on Risky Scientists and let's talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, so let's talk about why you left Reform UK. Before we talk about why you think we need Advance UK, why did you personally leave Reform UK?
I left Reform UK for a number of reasons. One, the party had fundamentally lost its direction. Farage doesn't. Farage is reform. Reform is Farage. They are synonymous. The man is a giant in his political persona, and he controls reform both technically, structurally, as well as simply by dint of forceful character. And so, what Farage, and I have a problem with that too, by the way, Bruce, because I campaigned quite a lot when I was in reform for democratizing it, having checks and balances in place. I don't think any political party should be controlled by one person. I think it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. And that should be self-evident to anyone listening. But because Farage is so important, his belief system and what he does becomes crucial. And he started talking utter garbage last year, saying things that were antithetical to the whole purpose of reform. So, for example, he was saying he wasn't worried about the rate of demographic change in the country, that he had no ambition to deport all people who'd entered this country illegally, that he would make, he would didn't want to politically alienate Islam, whatever that means. I mean, does that mean that he's going to take the knee to diversity, equity, and inclusion and allow our countries to cease to be a Christian constitution? It wasn't clear to me. He then went on to say bizarre things like he would consider taking Shamima Begum back into the country. Now, Americans may not know who Shamima Begum is. Perhaps you don't know, Bruce, but she was that 15-year-old girl who went to fight in Syria for ISIS, married, ISIS being that extreme um, form of Al Qaeda. I think they came out of Al Qaeda terrorist group that the Americans and the British had to fight. And this woman um, was married to a number, I think, of ISIS fighters, had children out there, was partly responsible for at least the burial of beheaded innocent people, had no real remorse, and yet Farage said he would consider taking her back into the country. I wouldn't dream of even the Conservatives understood. Sajid Javid stripped her of her British citizenship and left her there, but Farage was saying he'd take her back. And he was recruiting into his party. He still is recruiting into his party wholesale failed Tory MPs. Precisely the people who put this country into the position it's in are being welcomed with open arms into reform. The Conservatives, by the way, if reform wins the next election, the Conservatives would have won the next election because it's all Conservative members that now, infest reform. And so he's fishing in the same putrid pool of fish and expecting us to believe that he's going to catch fish of a high caliber. He's not. If we want to change the way this country's governed, we need fresh blood. We need a change of guard. Just rolling over the same old people again and again isn't going to offer the solution. So reform isn't it. Reform, sadly, in the pursuit of power and without Farage having a political philosophy, has become nothing more than an amorphous, blobby, politically expedient version of the Tory party. It's awful.
Yeah. So that's going to segue to this question about why we need a new. You're already answering this question. Why do we need a new
Yeah.
party? And then we'll get back to personalities later. So I'll just clarify the question by maybe giving you an alternative. You could have established a movement, which is what Rupert Lowe calls his Restore Britain, a movement rather. I think it's like a caucus rather than a party. So why a new party instead of a movement?
So Rupert Lowe's movement is predicated on being cross-party and carrying with him Conservative MPs, if possible, Labour MPs, Liberal Democrats, and Reform. And he therefore, again, is trying to make those infected fish that came out of this putrid pool. He's trying to make them all swim in the right direction. It won't work. It
Yeah.
won't work. We need a political force. A movement doesn't have any clout. It just gets together from time to time and it bangs the drum and it pretends it wants to do the right thing. I love Rupert, but I'm afraid he's gone down a cul-de-sac with his movement. The only pleasurable movement I ever have in a day is the first one of the day when I've had my first cup of coffee. And that's the only movement with which I want to be associated. Otherwise, I want to be a political force so that I can actually deliver what's needed for the country. There's no point just, banging drums, having a chat and or feeling good about yourself because you said a few good things. We've got to take power. That doesn't come
Yeah.
out of a movement.
Let me pose to you the argument I've heard from reformers for why they actually need conservatives. It's because the Conservative Party has a lot of experience with organizing a party as well as winning elections and putting up candidates. And reform is attracting people with government experience, people who have run campaigns, people who have raised raised money and have campaigned for grassroots membership. So maybe it's a trade-off that you do dilute your reforming zeal by allowing conservatives of the uniparty mold into your party, but it's a trade-off because you're also getting this experience.
It's not a trade-off, it's a capitulation to what's gone before. He's embedding what's already happened. We are going to get more of the same. You cannot chart a new direction by taking on the people who put you on this track in the first place. You can't go in the opposite direction. They don't know how to do it. And sure, they've got experience of government, and they were bloody awful when they were in government. Mass migration under the Tories. National debt more than doubled under the Tories. No GDP growth under the Tories. GDP per capita through the floor. A lack of recognition that we need to ditch net zero by the Tories. All these people are being taken in. Farage, uh, this has turned into a Farage bashing exercise, but it's difficult not to because reform is Farage, Farage is reform. He was on Capitol Hill a few weeks ago saying that he would repeal the Online Safety Act. Do you remember that? Because he blamed the Online Safety Act as acting as a mechanism to shut down free speech. 2 days later, at the Reform conference, he revealed Nadine Dorries as having joined the party. Nadine Dorries was the architect of the Online Safety Act. He created it. She put it onto the body of law into the body of law in the UK that we have. But 2 days before that, he was saying, I'm going to get rid of it. Then 2 days later, he's got the architect of it joining the party. How is he going to govern? It'll be a complete shit show. Sorry,
Yeah.
forgive me. It will just be a mess.
Yeah. So I agree with you. It's incoherent. Now let's just talk about Nadine Dorries. So what if I don't think she's repudiated the Online Safety Act, but what if she did repudiate it? Would that make her more acceptable in another party than the party she served when she wrote that law?
Then you have to struggle with trying to believe whether she's genuinely repudiated it or not. You've got that second thing to get through. But if you get a fish that's not from this putrid pool, that has been swimming freely in clear blue waters and is healthy and shiny and wonderful and is committed and has experience and is strong, why would you trade that fish? Why would you try and bring back to some health these fish that have already done so much damage. I can't take another one, Jake Berry, who joined Reform. Jake Berry voted to stay in the EU. He voted for lockdowns. He was pro the vaccine mandate, forcing people to have a vaccine, and he is pro net zero. All things Reform should stand against. Why is he in the Reform Party?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, so I mean, there's certainly been dilution. I suppose they can pose as converts. So there are a lot of reformers who became Brexiteers after the facts, and they may have been insincere, but at the same time, Brexit the referendum itself maybe proved to them what the true public mood was, and then the EU's response and the progressive elite's response to the referendum proved the problems with the country that changed their mind. I mean, isn't there room for conversion?
There's always room, but I think if you take Jake Berry, for example, all his entire belief system is anti-small state, anti-sovereignty. You can't be pro-lockdown, pro-vaccine mandate, pro-net zero, and having voted. There's got to be some indication that you've woken up to the folly of your thinking. There's no indication there. The truth of the matter is, Bruce, that those MPs who are leaving the Tory party, failed MPs who've already lost their seats, or even the ones who are joining now, they're joining Reform because they want to retain their seats, because they can smell they're going to lose them with the Conservative Party. That is just rats leaving a sinking ship. I mean, but by the way, there are some good Tory MPs, don't get me wrong. I mean, if they were to take Suella Braverman, for example, I'd be impressed. Suella Braverman, I think, really gets it. She voted to leave the EU. She voted against all Theresa May's false EU deals, and she stood firm. And she was a very brave Home Secretary in the sense that she identified the threats facing Western civilization and she called them out. She didn't have a good track record on immigration, but she's been superb in her political philosophy. Now, if they took Suella Braverman into Reform, that would be impressive, and she wouldn't suffer any fools lightly. But actually, they did the opposite. I don't know if you follow this, Bruce. They condemned Suella Braverman. They attacked her. They threw her under a bus. And she's precisely the kind of person they should have been holding out a helping hand to.
Yeah. So, well, I've actually heard that she is talking with Reform. I don't know if you've heard the same thing. She might be open to Advance UK. Would you take her?
I would take Suella Braverman, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So let's clarify your openness to take former Conservative MPs who claim to have converted from and
Suella
claim to.
Braverman hasn't claimed to convert. She's always been solid.
Yeah. But other MPs who have claimed to convert or repudiate the mistakes they made in the Conservative era, the progressive Conservative era, let's call it that. Now, would you be open to taking them? Maybe you would interview them and you'd need to be persuaded that it's a genuine conversion. I mean, are you open to that?
I'd need a lot of persuasion.
Got it. Yeah. Um, I should ask you, are you targeting any MPs for defection?
No, no. We want fresh blood. I really mean it. I want fresh blood. I don't want to go through the same old people who brought us into this problematic situation. And also, as I say, the party system has dumbed down the average MP. We need. We were a country that were. I'm sure you're about my age, Bruce. Maybe a little younger. I don't know how old you are. I'm 60, but you will remember, I'm sure, the great statesmen that we used to have in this country. They made their case calmly. They understood the points. They were right across the detail as well as the macro picture, and they were guardians of stability of our democracy. Things all went wrong with Blair, and Blair actually was the first populist in a way because he stood against the British establishment. He perpetrated a revolution about which we weren't aware at the time, but he got away with a revolution under the radar against the British establishment. He was a real populist in that sense, you know. But I want to return this country to being a bastion of stability, civility, understanding that changes when they come, having restored the UK, changes when they come should be incremental, very carefully considered. I want to be truly small c conservative, which is what made this country great. It was evolution over hundreds of years of political evolution that created the very delicate, brilliant land constitutional, unwritten constitutional setup that we had. And we've got to get back to that. And we're not going to get back to it by taking on people who are part of this post-Blair era.
Yeah, I got you. You're very clear, and I admire it, Ben. Thank you. So this is where we're going next. So we're segueing into, I get other other aspects of Advance UK's relationship with the other parties. So could Advance UK cooperate with Reform UK in, say, campaigning? So could there be an agreement where the two parties agree to campaign in neighbouring constituencies without campaigning against each other, and then they don't get accused of splitting the Conservative vote?
So Reform's not conservative, nor is the Tory party. They're not conservative. So the notion of splitting the vote doesn't arise. When people say you're splitting the vote, the presumption is that you've got two parties of very similar political philosophy standing against each other, splitting each other's vote. But if reform is infected in the way that I've just described, it offers no hope, it offers no solution. So what are we splitting? The question, if you don't mind me saying so, Bruce, is an inappropriate question because we're not splitting any vote. Reform doesn't offer the solutions. The key for Advance UK right now, and I think the key for the country, is to make the arguments for the kind of governance and the kind of changes that are needed to save our country and to make our country proud, independent, and prosperous again. Those we need to win that argument. And I'm not too fussed about electoral mathematics. The general election isn't for 4 years. We need to win the arguments, and then we'll look at what the electoral mathematics are in 2029, and we'll see what needs to be done to ensure that we can do the best possible thing for the country.
Yeah, got it. So it sounds like you don't want Advance UK to cooperate with Reform or the Conservative Party. Could Advance UK cooperate with Restore Britain or say Reclaim?
Yeah, so Restore, I'm already a member of Restore Britain. I joined on the first day that Rupert launched his movement. Reclaim, I don't think really has any aspirations to do anything. I think I love Lawrence, but I think basically he's not serious about gaining office or anything like that. Um, but Restore Britain, if it comes out with good ideas, we'll look at them, of course. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so next question is whether you would join a coalition government, and that coalition government could be a conservative reform coalition because I'm thinking of this because just this week, this is the week of the Conservative Party conference, and we got news from polling data that a majority, two-thirds of Conservative Party members want some sort of cooperation agreement or coalition with reform. That's probably self-interested. Otherwise, they're not going to get into government by the looks of current polling. So imagine a reform conservative government. Would you join such a government?
I would need to see where we stood at that time. The key, just to reiterate it, the key is to make sure they have the right policies. If they are prepared to adopt the right policies, which means cutting expenditure, slashing immigration, ditching the ECHR, getting rid of the Human Rights Act, getting rid of the Equalities Act, ditching the Climate Change Act, ditching, therefore, net zero. If they did all of that, then actually I wouldn't need to be in government. I can go back, by then I'll be 65. I can go and sit on a beach somewhere.
Yeah, I gotcha. Right. So, would you be happy to advise a government? So imagine that Advance UK isn't important to the parliamentary mathematics enough to be invited into the coalition government, a coalition government or a government. Would you be happy to advise that government?
I will do whatever I can to help the country. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
by
so
the way,
what's
can I just say one thing?
yeah,
Can I say one thing before we move on?
yeah,
There was a poll done in April which postulated a number of options, one of which was none of the above. Nigel Farage, Kemi Badenoch, and Keir Starmer. 23% chose Nigel Farage. I think something like 21 or 19 or 21% chose Keir Starmer, and Kemi Badenoch was down at 7% or something. But none of the above was at 41%.
Yeah.
The nation sees through reform. The nation knows the Tories are not the answer. Anything is possible. This is an uncharted political, we're in uncharted political territory. Advanced UK could get a lot of traction. We could start polling extremely well, and we may just win an outright majority. Everyone seems to assume that we will be a two-bit player. I wouldn't write us off. We're 3 months old. We've had unbelievable growth, getting to that 37,000 in 3 months. We've got a very serious, principled approach to the way we're going to grow the party. And I think that will resonate with the British people. I think they're going to come round to us.
Yeah, well, let me pass some of that data. So, I was going to talk about this later, but let's get to this. So it seems to me that reform is more popular than Nigel Farage. So when people are asked, uh, do you think Nigel Farage would make a good leader? The the respondents who agree it's a much lower proportion than people who say they would vote for Reform UK. So it strikes me that there are parallels that strike me with Trump. So Trump has overcome years of polling where his personal appeal to the American voter is much less than his policies and his the party, particularly the party once he remade it. Is there not? Um, do you not think that Nigel Farage could follow the same trajectory, where he overcomes this personal, what would you call it, personal the electorate's skepticism of him personally, he overcomes that. People say, well, I may not like him personally. He may not be the person I choose to be my son's godfather, but you need an insurgent. You need somebody who's going to smash the system. Somebody with the with
But how
the
is he going to smash the system, Bruce? He's taking on this. He is embedding the system into himself. We've talked at some length now about how he's recruiting all these failed politicians. How is he
yeah.
going to be a revolution? He
Well,
doesn't
you know him
offer a
better than me,
revolution.
right? Right. I've never met him. Is he capable of
He's never run
transitioning from?
anything. Bruce, he's never run anything. He's never run anything. He sat in the European Parliament for 20 years, banging a drum for Brexit. The minute we won the vote in 2016 to leave the EU, he absented himself from the playing field. He disappeared. At the very moment the British people needed him to paint the picture that he presumably had in his mind of what a post-EU United Kingdom looked like, he left. No one knows how he sees it. He even said, though, he said that he would consider the UK being part of the European Free Trade Area, EFTA or whatever it's called. And to be part of the European Free Trade Area is, in effect, give up on independence. Let's just please take one thing at face value. Nigel Farage does not have a political philosophy. He pivots one way or the other, depending on what he thinks he needs to say in order to curry favor with whichever constituency he's speaking to. He, therefore, is what I would call the ultimate political expedient. He wants power, he wants popularity, he wants to be the center of attention. These are not good qualities when it comes to governance. What the country needs is someone who will stand firm on the salient issues of the day so that we can deliver the country to safety. He does not offer a solution. He's not an insurgent. He's not a rebel.
Right. So, but he is a good campaigner, right? And he has
Yeah, so
he,
is
he
Boris
has been
Johnson.
very influential, and he's been influential in ways that I'm grateful for. So he was very influential on getting the government to concede a referendum on Brexit in the first place. He was very influential on winning that referendum, and he's still influential in getting reform. So he's actually getting reform right now, reform with a small r, because he is proposing policies that then other parties are picking up, including the ruling party, the Labour Party. So they're picking up, for instance, reforms of immigration that essentially Reform UK has already uh, offered it as its manifesto for 2029. So shouldn't we be grateful to Nigel Farage for those sorts of positive influences?
We should always be grateful for anything he's campaigned on which made sense. But campaigning as an outsider and forming a government are two very different things. But just on the policy bit, for example, a year ago he was on the record saying he had no ambition to deport ille all illegal migrants who are in the UK. Do you remember that? He said he has no. He said it was impossible to do it, and that he had no ambition to do it, to deport all illegal migrants. Since then, he's come round and he now says he is in favour of deporting all illegal migrants in the UK. The reason he's come round is not because he's suddenly reconnecting with some or creating some kind of political philosophy. It's because of Advance UK. It's because we led the way. The Overton window shifted ahead of him, and he's trying to ride the crest of the wave. He doesn't offer the solutions. So I'm grateful for anything he does which helps this country to go in the right direction. But a reformed government would be, at least the one he seems to be creating, would be deeply damaging to the country, which is why I just want to pick up on one thing you said. Reform is more popular than Farage. I agree. And which is why I fought very hard for the democratization of reform before I resigned from reform. You might be aware, I fought a 6-month campaign to democratize reform. And the reason I wanted it democratized was so that we could have a broader group of people who would hold Farage to account, who could come into the party and effectively take the party to the next stage, take it to a stage where it could be a government. But they shirked every opportunity to democratize the party and bring in checks and balances. So reform still is Farage, Farage is reform. Though Yusuf has some, Zia Yusuf, who's his new guy he's brought in, does have some kind of peculiar hold on Farage, which is inexplicable.
Yeah. So I think you've answered this question, but I just want to ask it again in case the audience missed it. So do you not think that Farage could transition from this great campaigner, the great uh, provocateur, to a government leader in a similar way to Trump? No, Trump's transition was very messy, so it basically took him his first term, more than his first term, to realize his own shortcomings as a premier, and also to struggle with the administrative state, which was resisting him and persecuting his cabinet appointees and making up stuff like Russiagate. I mean, that was his first term. So 4 years, sort of a limbo first term where Trump wasn't getting everything that he wanted done. But his second term, he's learned from that, and there was actually, you can say it took 8 years because there was a four-year Biden term in between before Trump got his second term and gets to do more of the things he wants, having learned how the system works, and also made changes to his own party and made changes to the government to make it work better for him. And he's still struggling with the administrative state. So, and he's 9 years into that process, right? So it's been messy for Trump, and God, we don't want a reforming government with a small r, maybe Advance UK. We don't want a reforming government to take 9 years to just get on top of the administrative state. But is there not room for Nigel Farage to learn from his um,
Bruce,
difficulties leading a party?
if he was learning, if he was looking at the trouble Trump had and learning from it, if he was learning from all the well revealed problems associated with trying to govern over the civil service, the lords, the quangos, the international supranational institutions which have their tentacles into the UK. If he looked at the landscape and he'd learned all of that, he would be arming the party with the most capable minds and capable people, fearless people in the country to mount a challenge to all those obstacles. He is not doing it. He
Yeah.
needs to get great people into his party. He's making zero attempt to get great
Yeah,
people
I
into
mean,
his party.
I'll confirm something from personal experience. So I was on the Defense Policy Committee for Reform years ago, and it had one meeting, and then I haven't been called back, and I don't know why that is. I'm a policy scientist who specializes in defense security policy, and I haven't been called back in years. And I've been offering myself to the party and not hearing back. So it does seem to be a party that is shrinking to Nigel Farage and Zia Yusuf. It's sort of a double act. The party is shrinking in its policy making, its policy development process. It's shrinking to these two people, and it's at the moment where it needs to be expanding its administrative research policy base.
Not
It
making any
doesn't
attempt to
seem to
do
be
it.
doing it.
No, I mean, you look at Farage has made a career. We're talking a lot about Farage, but Farage has built his entire career on being anti-immigration. Yet this is a man who did not believe in the mass deportation of illegal migrants. Eventually, when he got there, eventually when he realized he better get on that bandwagon, the mass deportation policy they came out with one day, they hold below the waterline the next day. Did you follow that? Because they
Yes,
said
sir.
all illegal migrants will be deported one day. The next morning, he was quizzed by journalists, and they asked him, "Would you deport women and children?" And in a desire to be all things to all people, which is what a campaigner does, he said, "No, of course we wouldn't deport women and children." And
Yeah,
and he hold his policy below the
yeah,
waterline because the minute you say you won't deport women and children, two things happen. The first is more and more women and children start making the crossing from France to the UK. And the other thing is all the single men who've already come here illegally get shacked up with women and children so that deporting anyone becomes problematic, even in a post-European Convention on Human Rights world, because no one wants to separate a father from their family. And then he went even further. If he understood the damage being done by supranational institutions, he would not have then said what he said, which is, I'm going to remove the European Convention on Human Rights from Great Britain, but I'm not going to remove it from Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is subject to the Good Friday Agreement, he argued, which, by the way, is debatable. But it's subject to the Good Friday Agreement. And in the Good Friday Agreement, Northern Ireland made a commitment to stick with the ECHR. And that was another hole below the waterline on his deportation policy, because if you leave Northern Ireland in the ECHR, but you remove Great Britain from it, every illegal migrant who wishes to escape being deported from Great Britain will cross the Irish Sea and go to Northern Ireland, where they will be protected. He would have made Northern Ireland the repository for all illegal migrants. That is not a deportation policy. That is bloody stupid.
yeah. I got you. I mean, I'm laughing. I'm laughing because going back to when Farage answered that journalist question the morning after that fantastic launch in front of that huge Union Jack of this very eye-catching, ear-catching policy on immigration. He what he said was when he was asked, "Surely you're not going to deport women and children?" He said, "Nobody is talking about deporting women and children." So it was not just a U-turn. It seemed dishonest. I mean, that's how I
Yeah,
reported it in my
yeah.
Substack. It wasn't true because he and his party had been talking about deporting women and children. He
The day
said
before, the day
everybody,
before.
yeah, everybody
Yeah.
is subject to deportation if you arrive illegally. And then he said nobody's talking about it. It's just made it just added
But there you
it,
go. There you go. Do you need to go further than that to understand he's a problem? Well, I don't think we need to go further than that one example.
yeah, okay, so let's move on from Nigel Farage.
Yeah, please.
um
Thank you.
so what's your relationship with Zia Yusuf?
Oh my God, we're still on reform. I've only shaken his hand once, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
no, okay. Richard Tice?
Richard Tice and I had a very harmonious, good working relationship. Richard understood completely that he needed a good body of people around him. He knew he had to build people around him. And he knew he didn't have all the answers, that he needed to consult people to get the answers. And that actually is true leadership. You know, if you look at what Trump has done this time round, the reason he's able to govern or making a much better fist of it than he did in the first administration is because he's got really good people around him. And Tice understood that. Farage doesn't get it. So Tice, sadly, if I were to be a detractor, if I was to say anything of a detracting nature about Tice, is that he doesn't stand up to Farage. He should say, "Come on, Nigel, get your act together."
Yeah. Well, so I've interviewed Richard Tice for this channel, and by the way, it was when Richard Tice was leader that I was on the Defence Policy Committee for the party. So there's more of a relationship between he and I than with Nigel Farage, who I'm I'm still asking the party for an interview with Nigel Farage. I've never had any contact with Nigel. So, all right. So, final question on relationships. What's your relationship with Rupert Lowe?
Very good. Rupert's doing his own thing. I don't believe in the movement, and he doesn't believe in the party. That's fair enough. That's our respective prerogatives. But Rupert and I see eye to eye on most issues. Um, yeah, it's sad, really, that he doesn't believe in a new party because it'd be great to have him on board.
Okay, so let's get away from parties. Talk about policies. So, Advanced UK doesn't have a manifesto yet. When do you think it would have a manifesto?
We're already drafting policy. The process we've taken is to first of all write our mission statement. And our mission statement is nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and for all its parts and for all its people, recognizing that we're a Christian constitution and making sure that we don't lose sight of that. Not just culturally Christian, but we are a Christian constitution, politically Christian. I know that Christianity has absented itself from the state and from governance, but actually we are still nevertheless constitutionally a Christian country, and it's reinforcing that, reminding ourselves of it. We stand for freedom. That's the second leg of our mission statement, which is freedom of speech, freedom from the state, and freedom of indoctrination of our children. We stand for democracy, which is making sure that those we elect are genuinely accountable to the people and that we're not governed by international law superseding British law, that we're not caught up in the tentacles of international institutions that prevent us from doing what's right for this country, or the domestic quangos are not full of bureaucrats that are defeating, again, what our elected representatives should be doing for us. So restoring our democracy. And then also we stand for equality under the law. And, in the pursuit of diversity, equity, and inclusion, progressive discrimination, all that sort of thing. We've set aside our criminal justice system in many respects. So we stand for that. And our mission statement is therefore nation state, freedom, democracy, and equality under the law. And all our policies will be drafted with that in mind. And the ultimate aim is to produce a proud, and I mean proud, independent, prosperous United Kingdom.
Yeah, I got it. So, when do you think a manifesto would be ready?
Uh, it'll be ready well in advance of 2029. And when it is ready, Bruce, it will have attached to it, perhaps not in the document that we circulate, but there'll be an appendix which people can click on and have a look at, which will be all the draft legislation which we wish to introduce at day one. And the reason we want to do that is so that when we go into Parliament, we have an absolute democratic mandate for what we wish to do, and no one can stand in our way. The Lords won't be able to tinker with it because we will say to the Lords, no, this has been approved by the British people. You've got no right to tinker with this. And the civil service will be cowed by it too. We must never underestimate the need for a democratic mandate. It's crucial. And so when politicians say, or they indicate, I'm saying all this now, but promise, when I get in, I'll do something slightly better than what I'm promising. What they're doing is giving up the democratic mandate. They're giving up the ability actually to deliver what they wish us to believe that they will deliver. If you want to do something for the country, the honest, correct way of doing it is making it plain in your manifesto and then doing it in government.
Yeah. So, so we're going to talk about some. You effectively do have policies, like promises of policies that you've spoken about in interview and actually at the launch of the party last month.
Sort of
So I want to
overarching
talk.
approaches to things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I heard you say at the launch that an advanced UK government would repeal every law passed by the current administration, Keir Starmer's administration.
Correct.
That was in answer to a question. It was a lot of fun. It went down really, really well. Maybe
Yeah,
it was off the cuff. Do you mean it?
I mean it. I actually mean to repeal virtually everything, if not everything, that's been passed since 1997. And even if we make a few mistakes in the repealing of various laws, because we do trip up here or there, which by the way, I don't think we would, but if we were to, the trip up would be minor, minor by comparison to the vast improvement we would make to our constitutional landscape. Tony Blair, as I mentioned earlier in this interview, mounted a revolution against the establishment. He changed our constitution in a period of 2 or 3 years. He changed it to one which has set the country down the path now, which brings it to the existential threat it faces. And so we must reverse everything that he did and every successive government did. We've got to burn the Equalities Act, burn the Climate Change Act, burn the progeny of the Climate Change Act, burn the Human Rights Act. And everything else, the Companies Act 2006 needs to be debugged. We've got to reacquaint ourselves with making money. We've got to go back to being the nimble, entrepreneurial, um, ambitious country that we were, proud and self confident in our ability to deliver. I reject completely this notion that we are past our great days. Why? Why are we past our great days? I reject completely that we need managed decline or that we need to be hitched at the hip to the EU to survive in a global world. I reject all of that. It's garbage.
Yeah. Well, it's Tony. I quite agree with you on Tony Blair. I've called Tony Blair. I've said of him that he's done more damage to Britain than that. He's done the most damage to Britain since Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
I think that was a funny turn of phrase.
Yeah.
Little bit controversial, but okay. So one of the implications of what you're saying, if you're going to repeal all these laws, it gets back to the last question. A reforming government, including an advanced UK government, it has to be ready with laws already written as bills, ready to put into the parliament to replace all these laws you're going to repeal. Is that your ambition?
Yeah, so I think the drafting of the repealing of laws is quite straightforward. You don't need many lines to repeal a
Yeah, but
law.
what about the replacement of laws? Like you're going to need new laws
So,
to.
so I think we need to go back before we can go forward. One of the mistakes I think governments are making and have made is that instead of going to the root causes of a problem when something emerges, like for example, let's take freedom of speech. It's a very good example. We all recognize that freedom of speech in the United Kingdom is being challenged and is being set aside. And there was a proposal for a Freedom of Speech Act, which assures freedom of speech. That is not the way to get freedom of speech. That is putting a sticking plaster over a gaping wound. What we need to do is get rid of all the laws. We had freedom of speech. When I was growing up, I used to say repeatedly, it's a free world. I can say whatever the hell I want. And I used to say it. And we were all kind of, we weren't always offensive to each other, but we had robust debate. And no one feared getting cancelled. You could have any argument you wanted to in the 1980s and 1990s. But there was no law saying you can have freedom of speech. It was the absence of all the terrible laws that have since been put in place that have now militated to that position. They've created this position. So we've got to go to the root cause of the problem, not put sticking plasters on it. And one of the great things about the British legal system, of which I'm sure you're aware, but the American audience may not be aware, is that in England, in the United Kingdom, anything is allowed unless it's expressly prohibited. You have a constitution in the US, so everything hangs off your constitution. But in our country, we have this common law approach to life, which you can do whatever you want unless there's a law that prevents you from doing it, which is a great way to be because it encourages freedom of action, freedom of thinking, and that's what made us entrepreneurial as a country. That's why we were such a formidable force for so many hundreds of years. It was partly due to that. And so when we repeal laws, we're not going to have a legislative vacuum, which some people say, Ben, you can't do it because you'll create a legislative vacuum. I say, bollocks. There was no legislative vacuum in 1996. I don't recall getting up in the morning in 1996 and being unable to get to the office in the same way that I can now. Of course, we'll get up the next morning and everything will be fine. And so I think we've got to go back to 1996 from a constitutional perspective, get rid of all the damaging laws that they've done, or as many as humanly possible, and then settle the country and see what then needs to be done to reform and do our
Yeah.
reforms gently with the benefit of experience.
Yeah. The I sense a lack of ambition or learned helplessness in British society when I get back to Britain. There's this learned helplessness over years of being in the EU and under progressive um,
Yeah,
governments, that administrations that
absolutely.
surrender sovereignty up and out and delegate authority responsibility to quangos, and they said we can't do anything. There's this learned helplessness, and it reminds me of the arguments before Brexit, where people were saying, well, how, if we leave the European Union, how are we going to trade? How am I going to buy Belgian chocolate if the European Union doesn't govern how we trade with each other? As if we didn't buy Belgian chocolate before the EU even existed. I mean, for me, these were from intelligent people. Fellow academics were saying
I
this
know, it's so
nonsense. It's
sad.
like, why can't you break
Yeah,
out of this
yeah. Or we
ideology
might
that
have
you?
to show our passports when we go through passport control. Oh, so you'd
Oh
surrender
dear.
your country so that you can walk through an e-gate. Great.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
really positive approach to governance, isn't it?
Yeah, and also that awful assumption, particularly in academia, was that international or supranational governments were much better at governing nations than nations were themselves. You couldn't rely on a national government to get things right. You have to outsource that sovereignty to the more liberal and more competent bureaucratic, authoritarian, undemocratic institutions because they do things better.
Nonsense. It's
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, this brings up an important point, I think, which a reforming government, remember, with a small r, which could be Advance UK, when it comes into government by 2029, maybe earlier, it's not just dealing with an administrative state, which worries me a lot. The pushback for the administrative state is going to be awful. And we've seen the precedent in the United States government when Trump first came in. You've got to push back against an administrative state in government, which doesn't want you to reform anything. But you've also got to push back against this learned helplessness in the wider British culture.
But the learned helplessness, I think, is something that really afflicts the educated classes. The working classes are fine. They're ready to do it. The people who voted to leave the EU, they got it. The British people got it years before our intellectual elite got it. And
Yeah.
so it'll happen pretty quickly, actually. I think, Bruce. Look at the way the Overton window has shifted in the last 2 or 3 years. It's dramatic. We are now able to talk about things. We're talking about mass deportation of illegal migrants. We're talking about turning back the boats. It's becoming an accepted form of discourse. If you'd said that a few years ago, you've been drummed out of polite, so-called polite society.
Yeah.
No, we're winning the argument. We are winning the argument. Advance UK and things like Advance UK are critical to win that argument. And
Yeah.
when we win the argument, this belief, how did you term it? This belief that we are incapable of being prosperous and great again. How did you call it? You had a good turn of phrase on it. Um,
What,
learned,
learned helplessness?
yeah, learned helplessness. That'll go because we'll paint the vision. We will show the country how we can be that great country that we were before, how everyone can improve their lot. They just need to have the shackles of state taken off them and given the opportunity to do it and have the path laid out. This is how you do it. Go on, you're free. Do it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now I'm thinking how Thatcher in the 70s, when she was developing reforming policies, a lot of people were skeptical about her personal capacity to do it, and whether we could change these things. I mean, the government would collapse unless the government, on the economy would collapse unless the government controlled the economy. None of these reforms, these Thatcherite reforms are dangerous. So but in a few years she got
It all
stuff
worked.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe but she was a pretty unique person. Maybe personality can do it, and it seemed, Ben, you seem to have that personality, that zeal, and the intellect to
Well,
do it. So, well, by the way, I should ask you: do you like being compared with Thatcher?
the Thatcher, I think, had an easy job comparatively. Thatcher had to fix our economy. Our very existence as a country wasn't threatened. The institutions of state were still the institutions of state. The Lords was the Lords, the King, the Queen was the Queen. These things are all changing at the moment. And so Thatcher just had to deal with the economy. And I think one of the mistakes successive governments have made is to put the economy over and above the constitution, the culture, and the people. We pursued economic growth as if it's some kind of God-given singular goal. Actually, the economy should serve the constitution, the culture, and the people. The economy should change. So she had a demanding job, but I think it was a much simpler job than we've got now. We've got to save our country.
Yeah. Well, I agree. So you just remind me, I should check on a few things. So we were talking about the Constitution just earlier. So it sounds like, and I quite agree, we can restore the Constitution by repealing laws which have um, uh, that contradict our constitutional freedoms, such as the Online Safety Act. So we could just repeal that, and that kind of restores the Constitution. However, do you think, as a lot of people are arguing we should, we should have a single constitutional text like the United States Constitution, which is more specific, more clear about what our freedoms really are?
I personally would be very, very nervous of it. I wouldn't say never, but we are certainly not in a position to do that as a country at the moment. The problem with the constitutional text is that, I mean, you tell me how the Americans have managed it, but the problem with the constitutional text is by definition, when you first draft it, it's a priori, it's without experience. You have to just draft it and hope it works and that it can stand the test of time and all the different forces to which your country will be subjected.
Well, maybe, but we could clarify some things which maybe are scattered across different legacy documents. So the freedom of speech, right? We could write the freedom of speech as a proposition, like in the United States Constitution, where we say the freedom of the people to express themselves is guaranteed, except in these circumstances such as incitement to crime.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we could do, where I'd like to meet you halfway, if I may, is get rid of all this nonsense that's come on our statute book since Tony Blair came to office, and then maybe have a law that does what you've suggested. People say the United Kingdom doesn't have a constitution. We don't have a written constitution. We do have a constitution. There are certain constitutional acts of parliament, like the Acts of Union that create our country, which, by the way, are left in tatters by the withdrawal agreement signed by Boris Johnson. But
Yep.
we do have constitutional acts of parliament, which are more important than other acts of parliament, if that makes sense. And I think we could do it piecemeal as opposed to trying to write a wholly comprehensive document that is
Yeah.
alien to us. But if someone said to me, Ben, I don't agree with you, I want you to write a constitution for this country, what I would do is go to the American Constitution and try and plagiarize as much of it as possible because there is some experience of that having worked.
Yeah.
Not
Yes.
brilliantly, because America is America, and we're different. But I think it at least there's a proven capability behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm still working out my thoughts on this myself. I actually have a discussion with Douglas Carswell about a British constitution. We're going to do it this month. And,
Right.
one of the questions will be, do we need a constitutional text? Can we do it legislatively? What would, if we have a text, what would be in it? What would be out? What would we leave to legislation? Stuff like that. So I'm still working that out. Uh, so let's. I just need a few more minutes with you, Ben, if you're comfortable with that.
Oh, of
Um,
course.
Thank you. So I've got some audience questions I need to get to because I did promise the audience that I would ask some questions. Now, just to finish out policy. So I remember very recently you told Godfrey Bloom in a podcast that you want to restructure the judiciary and fire politicized judges, which you seem to have led the Conservative Party on because Robert Jenrick this week pretty much came out with the same policy. I like the policy. I just want to ask you how you would restructure the judiciary and how would you make them accountable? Because there's lots of issues. Are they accountable to the Home Secretary? Could they be elected rather than appointed by government? Would they be accountable to senior judges rather than to home secretaries? How would you do it?
So one of the other damaging things Tony Blair did was to create our Supreme Court, which is really an American concept, not a British one. We had our supreme judicial body was Parliament. Parliament wasn't just the creator of laws, it was the adjudicator, the ultimate adjudicator of laws. And there was an elegance with that because the ultimate power of everything resided in Parliament. And then the law lords were kicked out and the Supreme Court was created, and it was all done under this great, separation of powers. But actually, we want to go back to powers not being separated. We want the body that makes the laws and understands the laws best to be the body that adjudicates those laws. And one of the benefits of being a lord is that you're not subject to the machinations of day-to-day politics. When you're sitting in the House of Lords, no one can fire you. No one can make you do this, that, and the other. And when you've got a body of people who comprise the law lords, then when any individual case is taken on and selections are made, one would hope that you don't end up with a bunch of politicized activists adjudicating the case. And if the supreme judicial body was the House of Lords as it was, then the courts below it would take their lead from the House of Lords, and that would filter down. And we had a really great judicial system. And you will know, and Americans will know, that it was famed right across the world. And many people came to this country to have their cases heard. And many people copied our legal system because it worked so damn well. Sadly, the Supreme Court is not working well. And it has become politicized, like so many other of the Supreme Court is nothing other than another bureaucracy, effectively, that's been created, and we need to unpick it. Now, the debate I think we're going to have in the college is: do we get rid of the Supreme Court and put it back into the House of Lords, or is it too late for that? And must there be another solution? I've heard some great lawyers who are completely at one with me in the direction of travel the country needs to go and say that you can't fold the Supreme Court back into the House of Lords very easily. And I want to have that argument. I want to have that debate before we come up with a policy on it, because my knee-jerk reaction is to get rid of the Supreme Court and put it back in the House of Lords. And then if there's evidence, and then the more day-to-day administration of high courts and the appeal courts and so on below the supreme judicial body, we do need to just identify judges who are overtly politically active. And I think Jenrick identified 30, and they should all be sacked. They should just be sacked. Can't have politics in law.
Yeah, so let me ask you what you think, and maybe you can defer this to the college to determine these things. But who's going to sack them? Is it the Home Secretary? Is it a senior judge? Is it the House of Lords? Is it the House of Commons? Who sacks them?
It's got to be the government with the democratic mandate to weed them
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Okay.
And
Very
that's why
good.
it's so critical, Bruce, to get that mandate. We
Yeah,
must get the democratic mandate. People must know what we're going to do. The judges must know what we're going to do when we get elected.
yeah. I'm with you. So another interesting policy. What do we call it? Not a. It's like a nascent policy or a neopol. I don't know. So one of the things you announced at the launch of the party is that you agree with Trump's tariffs. So how could an advanced UK government leverage tariffs to get what it wants?
So you might recall earlier in this interview, I said the economy had been put above and above and often to the detriment of the constitution and culture and people of this country. And in the pursuit of economic growth, the narrative got established, that actually you want to get the most cost effective products from the countries across the globe that can produce them most cost effectively, rather than trying to do everything here. The consumer will benefit and the British economy should be better off. That worked up to a point, but it's resulted in us becoming one of the biggest importers of goods in the world. We are one of the biggest net importers of goods. And if you don't make things as a country, ultimately you will go bust. There's only so much you can do in services to make up for the fact that actually you're not producing anything. We talk about the need to level up the United Kingdom. The reason we're so incapable of leveling up the country is because vast swathes of the country don't have any natural job to do like they would have done in the past. And this idea that China is better at producing tat than we are, or India is a false idea, because they can do it more cost effectively because they don't have all the employment restrictions. They don't have net zero hampering their energy costs. They don't have all the stupid bureaucracy that we've got. And instead of offshoring and deindustrializing the United Kingdom, we ought to be pursuing policies that actually make it more cost effective and able for British citizens to set up foundries, to set up factories, to set up manufacturing processes and reindustrialize the United Kingdom. We should be able to do it here. And that may be more expensive than China, but after that period of inflation, it'll be British goods that we're buying, made by British people and creating British jobs. Remember, every time you buy a product from abroad, effectively what you're doing is employing someone abroad. You're not employing someone here. We've got 8 million people out of 31 million people in the workforce, 8 million surviving on benefits. 8 million out of 31 million. We have a broken labor market. We desperately need to bring jobs back to the UK. And tariffs, in the absence of deregulation and cutting taxes here, which supercharges our ability to make stuff cost effectively, in the absence of doing that, and that can't happen overnight, tariffs is an important stepping stone towards it to protect our producers while we get our act together. And for example, you might be aware, Bruce, that Starmer was banging the drum. Great, we've got a free trade deal with India. Do you remember that a few months ago?
Yeah.
And I was holding
Yeah.
my head in my hands thinking, why do you want a free trade deal with India? They're going to sell us a whole load of stuff made by cheap imported Russian oil. We've turned our backs on Russian oil, put our own energy costs up, and now we're going to reward India by giving them jobs and buying their goods. That is not joined up thinking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Trump has a point. Now, whether or not he rolled out his tariffs in the correct way, I don't know if there is a correct way. He has the added advantage, of course, Bruce, of being the president of the most powerful economy in the world. And his tariffs, I think, kind of worked because everyone then came scurrying back to the negotiating table to say, well, can we cut a deal? Can we cut a deal? And he kind of got his way with it. I know there's some inflation now in the US, but don't mistake that small inflation that you're going to experience with the denuding of jobs and industry in the US that you would otherwise face. Better to have that period of inflation, get the inflation under control, and then have jobs in in the US and in the UK for American citizens and British citizens. And I think we've got to head in that direction. There's been too much global free trade. We need to bring jobs back to the UK.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a trade-off, right? And there are security implications too. I mean,
Absolutely.
free trade has, free movement has security implications which free traders tend to ignore. Gotcha. All right. So another apparent policy you announced at the launch, and I laughed so much when I was watching it, was Bonk for Britain. I think that was off the cuff. Bonk for Britain. What did you mean?
So again, through progressive state intervention, more spending, more taxation, highly regulated economy, etc., we have put British citizens in the awful position where couples can only manage by both members of both spouses working and not really being able to afford to bring children into the world. And if you have an economic system, a cultural system, which doesn't encourage people to have children and to form families, you end up without a country because the people are the country. If families are the smallest building blocks on which communities are built, and then communities form the building blocks of society, and society is your nation state. So families are critical. And so we will have policies which reward British citizens for getting married, for having children through the tax system, getting married, having children, and then one spouse staying at home. So instead of giving benefits to people who can't afford to have children, we will encourage those that work to to get married, to have children, and then for one of those spouses to stay at home and give the other spouse who's working further tax relief. I've written this out actually for for college members already, and with numbers, we've got to stage with numbers, and I've called it Bonk for Britain because it gives the incentive for couples to get together, have lots of children because they'll get tax relief, and then for one of those parents to stay at home because they'll get tax relief and bring up the children. So instead of handing your children over to the state to be indoctrinated from a very young age, they'll have maternal or paternal care bringing them up. And the best form of child rearing has to be through the family. You wouldn't need the Online Safety Act if parents were monitoring their children more closely. And so I call it Bonk for Britain because I want lots of Brits to be getting together and shagging. And what could be more beneficial and more fun for the country than doing that?
I think it'd be more fun. And what more patriotic thing could you be doing?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. All right. So the last policy question, and then we're going to get to audience questions, was quickly. So I've heard you complain often that the political elite has self-segregated in the sense that it's hiding behind a new fence around Parliament. It doesn't get, it doesn't knock on doors. Candidates don't knock on doors like they used to, and therefore politicians are out of touch with ordinary people. But how are you going to provide or incentivize politicians to get out into the community more, but still preserve their security at a time when politicians are getting stabbed to death, shot to death in the United States? There seems to be a lot more political violence than ever.
So in the 1980s, there were no bollards or protective barriers for Parliament. They started, I think, in the late 1980s, early 90s, when the IRA started bombing London. And progressively, or there were bombs in London, and they put up barricades. And progressively, Parliament has surrounded itself with greater and greater security. There can be no explanation for this security and for the 9 foot tall metal fence, which is new, that surrounds Parliament, other than they have presided over a failing state, a state which used to be so well governed that they didn't have to fear the people, is now a state where they have to fear what might happen if they don't have a 9 foot tall fence. So something's gone fundamentally wrong in the relationship between those that govern us and those that are governed. And that can only be that could only have gone wrong because we were governed badly. It's not the people who are at fault here. It's the government that's at fault. They've been doing things that has now required them to be protected from the people. And so we must unpick everything that they've done that's required them to put up a fence. They will naturally be able to come back into the community if communities are safe. And communities will be safe if communities are prosperous, communities are settled. There isn't, division and multicultural silos all tearing at each other's throats, and that the criminal justice system is working. And all of this requires the root and branch kind of restoration of the United Kingdom that we have been talking about before. I so often hear, for example, and you would have heard it, and lots of Americans would have heard it, we're going to be tough on crime, we're going to recruit lots of new police officers. There is no point recruiting more police officers if, having recruited them, all they're going to do is police tweets. What we've got to do is change the architecture of the criminal justice system so that they know what it is they're meant to be doing and they're actually really policing criminality. And That's not so difficult to do. I think we'll be able to achieve that. And once you've done that, you won't need to recruit 20,000 new police officers because those that you've already got in the force know what it is they're meant to be doing. And if you
Yeah.
can be economically prosperous and you follow policies that settle society and multiculturalism is dealt with and so on, then everyone will be at peace or relative peace. There'll always be disagreements and there'll always be people in society who do bad things, but we'll be relatively at peace and we can go back. For me, a sign of success in this country will be delivered from peril the day that that 9 foot metal fence comes down. That will be the sign of success. When that metal fence around Parliament comes down, we'll know we're safe. When the
Yeah.
politicians
That's
don't fear us, we know we are safe.
right. Yeah, that was very American, what you just said. Yeah, that'd be a great marker. So, so listen, let's get to audience questions. So I'm going to quote this. So this is not me. It's not my question. I'm going to quote. The quote is, "When will Advance set forward a way forward for fair social housing?" Question mark. And then there's an explanatory statement. I'm still quoting. "Personally, I am sick of hedge funds and millionaires building massive portfolios and would love to see councils being allowed to buy up property to let." End quote.
So that's a very detailed policy question, and we're formulating our policies at the moment. But there is undoubtedly too much pressure on housing as a result of the very onerous conditions which need to be, adhered to when you build a house, but also the demands put on housing by mass migration and so on. And what we've got to do is make sure that we can produce housing cost effectively in this country so that people don't have a problem being able to afford either to rent or to buy a house. So let me just give you one example. The Labour government has said they're going to build 1.5 million houses during their term and they're going to deregulate planning. And the way they're going to do it, Bruce, is to build on green fields. There is no shortage of property that could be repurposed for housing, but we can't repurpose it for housing because the net zero targets that we've got make the reuse and redeployment of these properties prohibitively expensive. Loads of town centres are derelict because we can't repurpose those buildings easily because of net zero obligations. And this comes back to something I think I said earlier, where you need a coherent, holistic approach to policy making so that if you ditch net zero, you reduce business rates, you deregulate the planning system, you make it therefore cheaper to build, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That you bring back into productive use properties which at the moment are not in productive use. That in itself will start addressing the housing issues that we've got in this country. And then if you slash migration, you get rid of all illegal migrants, you stop indefinite leave to remain, people are encouraged to go back to their countries, etc. Demand for housing will drop and people will be able to get back on the ladder again. Do you see what I mean? So you can have the sticking plaster of rewriting the social housing rules, or you can address the fundamental root of the problem and make sure that we've got adequate housing for everyone because of the overall approach we take to how the country is governed.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So these comments, they're short comments, they're quick comments. We can get through them quickly. They're comments that were posted on the stream of the live stream of the launch of Advance UK. So I was co-streaming the launch at the invitation of the party, and I was happy to do it because any launch of a new party is a big and rare event. So there were some comments there, not members of my regular audience, but I had 10,000 live watchers,
Yeah, wow.
and I think some of the comments were intended to counter message or smear, and I just want you to have an opportunity to put them to bed or correct them. Right. So
Cool.
first one, quote: "Ben said that he would never join UKIP because they are racist, and even more so because of Tommy Robinson." End quote.
So that quote is, I think, from the 6th of May, 2019, which was 3 weeks into me entering politics. I joined a Brexit party, and the party line, Nigel Farage was leader of the Brexit party. The party line was that we would have nothing to do with UKIP, because the argument being made then was, why is Farage setting up a new party? Why is he not going and managing UKIP, which was his party? And that was the party line put out. And wrongly, as it happens, because I now see things much more clearly. I've been on my own journey of discovery. I did a lot political. My political philosophy hasn't changed, but it's been like peeling an onion, and I've been peeling layers of the onion back to reveal the real issues facing this country in the political landscape, and indeed Farage, etc. And that was the party line. I put out the party line. And I've realized since then, actually, things are not quite as they seem.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so this next comment was by a different person, but it's kind of overlaps, I think. So, quoting, Tice smeared UTK, Unite the Kingdom rally, I think, as, quote, that lot. And Habib smeared UKIP as racist and Islamophobic. True patriots would never say this ever. Both seem fake political expedients. So I think both means you and Tice.
So, I mean, I can't speak for Tice. I don't think Tice should ever have called them that lot. That comment came a few months ago after Tice and I had been in politics for a long, long time. Um, Tice should retract that, actually. Farage should retract his criticisms of the people who went to the UTK march, because, as you know, there are a million people, roughly, or well over 500,000. I mean, who knows? But there was well over 500,000, um, possibly a million, and there were 2.5, 3 million people watching online. So there was a real democratic call for that rally, and you can't, as a politician, in my mind, turn your back on it. So I can't answer for Tice, but I think he was wrong to call them that lot. And in my speech, when I spoke at the UTK rally, I think I said, "You lot, you know, are our lot," and we
I
are the British
remember.
people.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are the British people. But again, on the other point about Islamophobic UP, that's still going back to that one quote from, I think, the
Yeah.
6th of May of 2019.
Okay. Gotcha. So next one, quoting, a party for far right, comma, racist Islamophobes with a Pakistani Muslim leader, exclamation mark. You couldn't make it up. End quote.
So we're not far right. We believe in the nation state, in freedom of speech, democracy, equality under the law. That is the only thing we've put out so far. None of that is far right. I'm not racist. I'm not xenophobic. Just because I recognize the importance of a settled culture and the absence of mass migration does not make me racist or xenophobic. My father is indeed a Muslim. My mother is white, blue-eyed Christian English lady. I was brought up really without too much influence one way or the other, but we observed, we celebrated Easter, we celebrated Christmas, we went to church, we sang hymns. I went to boarding school in this country. I went to Cambridge University afterwards. I'm steeped, I think, in what it means to be British. I was baptized in 1994. I married my wife in a church, another white English lady. And uh, I'm not a sort of Bible thumping Christian. I'm not. I'm a lapsed. I'm really very not strong on religion at all. But I recognize the importance of the Christian constitution that we have and the great benefits it's afforded this country. It's academic that my father is a Muslim. I would call him a lapsed Muslim. He drank like a fish, and he wouldn't recognize that spare ribs were pork because he loved the taste of them so much. He used to call them beef spare ribs. He used to forbid us as children to tell him that they were pork. So he's a perfectly reasonable human being, which, by the way, the vast majority of 1.8 billion Muslims on the planet are perfectly reasonable, good people. There's no problem with it. There are issues and challenges with Islam that cause problems and are not consistent with the way we govern ourselves in this country. Um, but I reject wholly all that nonsense about being a far right, racist, xenophobic party with a Pakistani Muslim in charge. He's wrong. He's factually wrong at every single level.
Yeah, gotcha. All right. So next one, quoting, he seems like a nice enough chap, but he is too much of a drip. Full stop. Listen to him. No true British patriotism in him at all.
Well, people have got to judge. My drip, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I
It's a
find that
drip
difficult.
is.
Yeah, because
uh,
I was watching the same stream and you had the same passion as you had in this interview, you clearly care. You're putting your money where your mouth is and your time. So I'm going to second you on that one. Let's move on from that one.
I
All right. So
boxed for Cambridge, so I challenged this guy to get in a ring with me. Let's see who's a
yes,
drip.
yes, that is brilliant. Old school. I love it.
Yeah,
Okay, last one. And this
yeah.
is more, I think, more of this is more interesting because it's prospecting how things may play out. So, quoting: Reform gets in, stabilizes Parliament again, full stop. Then the likes of Advance can build up seats in Parliament. Totally replace Labour and the Tories. It'll take time, but as long as the terrible parties go. So I think you get the idea. The idea is that Advance UK's
Comes in on
breakout
the
is going to be
coattails of
in the
reform.
next Parliament. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think?
maybe. Let's see what happens. We might accelerate the process.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ben. I've really enjoyed discussing with you. I always enjoy hearing you. It's been a privilege
Well,
and
thank you,
educational
Bruce.
for me to speak with you. Thank you, sir, for giving us the
No,
time. Your final message, sir.
just thank you very much for listening, everyone. Thank you for having me on, Bruce. Never forget that what made the West great were the nation states of the West. It wasn't the EU, it wasn't the WHO, it wasn't the UN. It was the nation states that made the West great, and we must protect our nationhood. We must protect our people. And I wish the American administration every success in making America great again.
Thank you, sir. Well said.